This is a production of SDPB.
Coming up on Game Time, we're less than a month away from crowning some state champs. It's officially the playoff push, and we're here to break it all down. Plus, we had some big-time performances on the court. We'll highlight that in our Game Changer segment. And as always, we give you something to look forward to with our top tilts. All that coming up next on Game Time.
Game Time is supported by the South Dakota Career and Technical Student Organization Center. Through CTSOs, South Dakota students can learn professional development, leadership, and industry-specific skills, helping students learn, lead, and succeed.
Another week of Game Time here on SDPB. I'm Nate Weck, joined as always by Jason Andera. Jandy, it's always good to see you.
It is, and we are less than a month away from getting some of our state champs. We're just a little bit over a month away from getting our boys state champs nailed. So today we're just going to kind of go through some of the teams we don't talk about very much.
Exactly.
Looking for their way to get a playoff push into good position to not only qualify for the SODAC 16, but even further.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is a great time of year as all these pictures start to become a little bit more clear.
A little bit more in focus.
And so we're going to be excited for the rest of the way here the next few weeks. But let's start with some of the headlines, all right? Boys basketball, we had some really good AA games this past week. Let's start first with Lincoln and O'Gorman.
Yeah, AA, obviously the big question is can anybody beat Lincoln? Well, twice now they've gotten a scare, and last week got a huge scare against O'Gorman. OG made a push at the end of the third quarter. They tied it at 50 with some really great three-point shooting. They took the lead with just 6.5 minutes left, and then they actually had a chance in the final minutes to beat Lincoln, but O'Gorman couldn't quite do it. O'Gorman's played a pretty good schedule this year. Their only losses have come to those top-tier teams.
Yeah, and if you're O'Gorman, that's exactly the position you want to be in, right? Like, really challenging some of the top teams. And I know it's a loss on the scoreboard for the Knights. I get that. And I know that there was probably some heads that were like, man, we almost had it. But it's a really good sign when you can take who has really been one of the most undisputed top teams in the state this year, when you can take them to the limits like that. So me personally, I'd love to see a rematch.
Exactly. And for Lincoln to be tested a couple times this year and still be undefeated at that point,
Exactly.
That was great. And then Roosevelt only had one loss on the year. They get tested by Watertown. Watertown had that huge stretch of games we were talking about where they played four Sioux Falls teams in a short span. Well, they ended up 2-2 in that span, and a big part of that was just getting a win over Roosevelt at home. Watertown actually was up double digits in that game. They were up 12 points with 2:14 left. You think it's over, but Roosevelt made a huge scamper at the end to try to get back into this game. But Watertown, I think they had that home cooking going. They had just enough to fend them off and to get the 71-68 win. That's a huge win for Watertown. So both teams at the top got a huge scare.
Yeah, I wonder, just because of the run that Roosevelt went on at the end, how slow do you think that clock was going for Pat McClemens?
Oh man, that had to be a lot. But thanks to Jackson McClemens and Jack Mack, some really timely shooting, Watertown found a way to push that clock just enough to get it over with and get out of there with a win.
And then, of course, we had Lincoln and Roosevelt on Tuesday night.
Lincoln got out to a great start in this one against Roosevelt, got up 20-7 early, and then most of the night just held a double-digit lead to take care of Roosevelt. It's tough to do that against a good Roosevelt team, especially when their big three each go for 15 points. Sam DeGroat, Sam Erickson, Brody Schaefer all got theirs. And Roosevelt tried, but just could not come back. Lincoln played really good defense to make sure they couldn't get back in the game. So big win for them.
All right, well, we talked about this last week, too. It was going to be from the Corn Palace in Mitchell, the DWU Culver's Classic. Culver's Classic, love that.
Yeah. You gotta have a sweet treat while you're at it.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So let's go through some of those results too, because there were some big matchups that definitely need to be mentioned from that.
Well, I think Wessington Springs made the most advancement by getting a win in that game over Freiburg Hurley, won 55-47. But this is a team that's kind of on a roll now. They started getting some players back off of injury. They started getting some players like Logan Mebius, who wasn't on the team at the first semester of the year. He's worked his way back in, and now all of a sudden Western Indian Springs is a team to watch. They just knocked off one of the top teams in Class B in Viber Gurley. Another team that's really been making a strong push is Freeman, and they went up against Wall. That's a tough matchup.
I actually thought this one was going to be a little bit closer.
Most people did.
And yeah, I mean, give credit to Freeman. We've talked about the athleticism of both Freeman and Wall kind of throughout the whole year because we got really excited about these teams because we saw what they did during the football season, right? And we saw what the athletes did when they had the ball in their hands. Same thing with basketball. The athleticism is definitely there for both these teams, but it was just Freeman's day.
It was. They had 5 players in double digits. Sorensen had a great game for them. They held Thielen Kierstead. That was the key. They held him to just 9 points and got the win on that one. I think Wall maybe needed a good test like that before they enter this next stretch, but Freeman is looking like one of those teams to watch out for in Class B.
Then you had Hamlin that took on Pine Ridge. Pine Ridge came across the state, had one game down in Vermilion at the Sanford Coyote Sports Complex down there at USD against Lennox, and then they turn around the next day to the Corn Palace, and 2 really tough back-to-back games there for the Thorns.
Yeah, going against Lennox and Hamlin back-to-back days. You'd think the second game would be tougher. Well, they actually played better in the second game, but Hamlin was just too much in that one. And then the Sioux Falls Christian St. Thomas More game, we were kind of curious to see how that would go. That was no problem whatsoever for Sioux Falls Christian. Too much depth on that team. They spread out the scoring, and St. Thomas More just couldn't keep up. Good defense on both sides. So a lot of good games in the DW Culver's Classic.
And then you had the girls side of it as well. And, Hamlin, Sioux Falls Christian, what a great game this one was.
This could be easily a game we see on Saturday night of the state tournament because these two are so talented. Sioux Falls Christian really coming on strong the last couple of weeks. Hamlin is continually getting tested by these good teams, and they keep passing. Well, this one, Sioux Falls Christian had him. They had him by 5 a number of times in the fourth quarter. Hamlin comes back, forces overtime, and then in overtime, they hit a flurry of 3-pointers after getting down quickly to push it to a double overtime game. Addie Neuendorf had a 29-point game. Leslie Setzer, a great player for Sioux Falls Christian, went for 21 and 11. But the threes really made the difference for Hamlin in this one in the end.
Yeah, and again, like Class A girls, I know we've talked a lot about Makpialuta, we've talked about Lennox, and then you start seeing like Hamlin has just continued to get better as the year has progressed. Sioux Falls Christian, obviously had a lot come back from last year, but they've continually got better throughout this season. I mean, there's 4 or 5 teams I could point at right now and make a case for.
I think so. I think Makpialuta just played a super good schedule this year, which has really solidified them as the number 1 team, but who's to say on a night where Addie Neuendorf's going for 27 and you're hitting threes as a team from the outside, they can win. Sioux Falls Christian, we know, has what it takes to win, and you mentioned it, Lennox, another team that's proven they belong in that conversation.
All right, well, then we also had, at the Corn Palace, we had Lyman versus Parkston.
Yeah,
Lyman, another really good program. Parkston, a really good program. We were excited to see how this one would shake out, and this one went Lyman's way.
Yeah, Lyman really dominated in this one. Got up 21 in the second half. Ended up winning by 10, but it was a big night for Jordan Scott, and you have to play really good guard play to beat Parkston. They were able to play great guard play, and Max Scott got a double-double on the inside for them as well. So huge win for them there. That really solidifies Lyman as your number 1 team. And then another one we really had our eye on was Ethan and Bennett County. And Bennett County really started to catch fire here in the last month or so. They've been winning some games. But Ethan came out, and when you shoot like that, that is impossible to beat them.
Yeah, 14 3-pointers for Ethan. And when the Rustlers, they've always seemed to be one of those teams that they've always just had a lot of consistency within their program year in and year out. Man. And yeah, you said it, defense. But then when you get the 3-pointers that are just falling left and right as well, man, it's really tough to win a game when your opponent is shooting lights out like that.
So they did that on Friday, and then they came back and played a makeup game in the Hanson Classic on Monday and took on Parkson, who had just lost. Well, they took care of Parkson by 10 points in that one, too. Another headline in girls basketball, we had a battle between last year's champions, Bennett County, and this year's number 1 team in Lyman. And Bennett County, right after losing last week in the Corn Palace, comes back and decides to go up and down the court. They scored a ton of points, 70-plus points against a really good Lyman team. And they did it with Reagan and Payson O'Neill, who were really big. Reagan goes for 25, Payson with 16. Great contributions from off the bench. And the defense held Lyman despite giving up 25 points to Jordan Scott, and Max Scott got hers as well, but did a good job overall defensively and kept the pace up to beat a good Lyman team. So Lyman suffers their first loss to a Class B team, and Bennett County kind of reestablishes themselves as a, hey, remember us? We can get this thing done. So a big night on Tuesday night for Bennett County. Well, they took care of Parkson by 10 points in that one too. So huge pair of wins for Ethan that really, to me, establishes them as a contender in Class B. I mean, you've got Lyman, who's looks like the number one undisputed team right now, but after that, anybody's guess.
Right, and then, who knows, Bennett County last year at the state tournament kind of turned it on, flipped the switch, and they were off and running, So you get talent in the tournament, and who knows who's going to flip the switch at any given moment.
I think that's the case for sure this year. I mean, even a team like Centerville, for instance, they lost early on to Crofton, and then, lost to Iron Wakanda in a game they didn't play very well, but have not lost since. So I think there's a lot of teams in Class B that could really make a push.
All right. Well, as we do every week, we go through the game changers, the top performers of the week, and let's start with the boys. Jandy, who do you like?
How about Dylan Ferguson? Goes for a 28-point game on Valentine's Day. Gotta love that, right? Trey Hansen, he's here every week. They struggled as a team to beat Dakota Valley, but in the losing effort, put up 38 points in that game. Isaac Hunter, a 33.8 rebound game against Ron Colley, one of the standouts for Miller this year. Dupree's Jaden Marshall, he put up a 30-point game against Faith as well, so that's huge for him. And then Marvin Richard III, we could name every game, but he came up big in his weekend games too.
Yeah, and with Marvin Richard III, real quick here, because we're going to be talking about him here in the next few weeks as well, as we kind of progress to the end of the season. But when you see a box score for him of 25 points, you sometimes think, oh, did he have an off game?
Yeah, exactly.
And he didn't have an off game. That's, the 25 points, 7 assists, 6 3-pointers. Plus, look at how much time he was getting double teamed and trying to find plays to feed the ball. So, for him to still do what he did is, I think, fantastic.
He is truly one you have to game plan around. So he had a great game as usual, great set of games. Tatum Sorensen, though, out of Dakota Valley. This is a really young team that gets a lot of their scoring from a couple of freshmen on the team. And then this senior Tatum has had such a huge year. But look at this. This was his best week of the season. 39-point game against Dells, and then backs it up with another big game.
I don't think I could shoot 80 points in 2 days at the gym if there was
2
nobody
days
guarding me.
For Tatum.
So what a terrific job.
And huge wins for the team. Dakota Valley is, got some out-of-state losses. They kind of fell out of the polls, but this shows they belong in contention if they can take care of a Vermilion team when Tatum Sorensen's putting up 41.
Absolutely.
Ben Weber, a 28.12 rebound game against White River as well. And then Tuesday night, a lot of good exploding games as well. Grant Wilkinson of DeSmet, he's on this list almost every week. Another 20-20 game for him, 24 points, 25 rebounds, and a win over Esteline, a good Esteline Hendricks team on Tuesday night.
All right, and then we got the girls' side. Some of the names we say every week is, you're going to see some familiar names, but then there's some new names. So, like, one of those new names is Maya Anderson out of Canton. What a game she had this past week.
We don't always get stats from every team, so I apologize if she, has done this all season long. This is the first time I noticed. Went for a 37-point school record game, a school record 8 threes as well last week, so a huge game from Maya. That was unbelievable. How about Kaylee Craddock? She's been here now the last few weeks. She's been making it consistently. A pair of 20-point games, a pair of double-doubles. Sioux Valley's really tough when she's playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what you want to see is just this consistency, this build where you start seeing players that finding their path and they're finding that consistency gene as well. Once that consistency gene hits, it can be good for all the surrounding cast as well.
Jalen Huntermer continued her big week with a 41-point outing with 6 3-pointers for Arlington and a close loss to Chester, a really good Chester team, but Jalen Huntermer just had an absolutely big week. Ashlyn Coble had a good game as usual earlier in the week, and then Tuesday night goes for a 32-point, 13-rebound, 6-block game against Gregory, totally just shutting down the Gorillas. So Ashlyn Coble continues her torrid year. Hazel Luthmer scores 24 points, but the important part of that, it set a school record for most career points. Congratulations to Hazel. Addie Neuendorf had a pair of 16-point games. Those were 2 low-scoring games of the week. She had 29 in that game we were talking about at the Corn Palace on Friday. Olivia Paget, a 25-point game in a really close matchup with Marshall. They needed all of those 25 points to win, and she provided that on the way.
Yeah, Brandon Valley, tremendous year that they've had. They've had some close games,
A couple close ones lately.
They have, and they've been tested, and sort of the same that we've seen Lincoln kind of get tested. But that's really great for good teams when you can get tested and still find ways to win.
Yeah, that's a good win against Marshall, and like you said, got tested against Washington the week before. Taylor Roovers, she had the huge week last week, continues her torrid pace, 33 points in a close loss to Lakota Tech on Tuesday night. She continues to have a terrific season. Kinley Spans out of Trip Delmont Armor, a 27-point game with 12 rebounds to boot. Huge for her.
An 8th grader out of Lakota Tech making an appearance, Rosie Shangru. Again, 8th grader.
8th grader. Get ready. Get familiar with her.
Had a 37-point game against White River, and then came back and had a 41-point game. I mean, she's already approaching 500 points for a career as an 8th grader. Definitely somebody to have your eye on.
Yeah, and Dale Pine Jr. did the math. She should stay, if she stays around 20 points a game, it could be around 2,000 points here toward the end of her career. So great start. Great start for Rosie. Izzy Stephenson, a 27-point game Tuesday against Britton Hecla. You know, we talk about Addie Neuendorf a lot, but Izzy Stephenson having a terrific year for Hamlin. Marissa Storm in that game against Bennett County, when we were talking about all those threes, she was responsible for 7 of those. Crazy night for her.
Yeah, 7 3-pointers. Got to give a lot of credit to that.
Back to back, another player with 7 3-pointers. How about Talia Vincent? A 7 3-point game on Friday, comes back 2 days later and hits 6 threes and gets 18 points. So all of her points in
all of
2
them.
games,
Yep.
Nate. What do you make of that?
Well, if she's open on the perimeter, I say try to feed her the ball.
Well, the cool part is she actually added in 6 assists. So when they do come out to guard her, somebody's open.
She's able to dish it around and find an open player, which is big.
That's big. And then Bridgewater Emery's Oakley Weber went for a 27-point, 6-rebound game against Kadoka.
And again, we appreciate everybody that sends in all of the results week by week, helping us out with the stats. As we've said before, there's not really a one-size-fits-all format for how stats get entered in South Dakota. So we appreciate everybody reaching out to us every week to let us know who we should be talking about.
Exactly.
All right, so we actually had a really busy weekend this past week. We had the state team duels tournaments, Class A and Class B out at Pier High School at TF Riggs. We had the state gymnastics meet taking place in Mitchell at the brand new high school there. Central High School up in Aberdeen was hosting the state esports tournaments. We have pictures, we have live streams from all of those events. Go check them out on our YouTube channel. Go check out all of the results from the events too. I was at Team Duels, and we very similar to last year with Sturgis winning, I believe it was their 3rd straight Team Duels title in A, and then Canton, the powerhouse that they have with wrestling there, they won their 4th straight Team Duels title in Class B.
It's hard to believe we're at that time of year where we're already ending some of these winter seasons, and a busy weekend for SDPB with all that coverage. And it's just great to see that week in, week out here for the next few weeks. We're going to have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. All right, so Jandy, the playoff push for basketball, we're officially in playoff push season.
Yep.
Let's jump into it. Should we start with the girls in AA?
Let's do it. Their SODAC 16 takes place on March 6th. So we got just a couple of weeks left before they have to stop. They actually play a little bit longer than the girls A and B does, just because they go right to it. They don't play any regions. But let's just recap what we're looking at here. Brandon Valley probably has that one spot. If they can get past Spearfish, Mitchell, and Huron in their remaining 3, they'll be the 1 seed going forward, which should give them a ticket to state, but puts them in good position with where they've been all season long, right at that number 1 spot.
Absolutely. And Brandon Valley, they've, like we've mentioned, they've had some games where they have been tested. We saw it, with Washington taking them to overtime a week or so ago, and they've been tested. And when they face that adversity, there's usually a timeout. They collect themselves, and they do such a good job coming out of that and changing the momentum, which very, very few teams can do that on a consistent basis. Yeah. The Lynx are one of them.
So they're right there. O'Gorman's probably locked in at 2. The rest, there's a little time to wiggle around, but really we're looking at Mitchell, who's at 7, T's at 8, And then you got Spearfish, Harrisburg, Huron, all trying to vie for that home game. So we kind of pay attention to what's going on in that 7-8 spot. And then the top 16 make this tournament. So Pierre, Sturgis, Watertown, Brookings, 2 of those 4 looking to punch their ticket. They've got about a week and a half left to see what they can do in that area.
And double A is a little bit different than A and B because your top 8 teams, they play home games for that. Whereas in A and B, there's a neutral site for that SODAC 16. So the 1 through 8 seed in double A, crucially important if you want home field.
For sure.
All right. Class A. All right. We've talked, this is turning out to be one of my favorite classes of the year. Kind of in that same realm as B-boys, which we'll talk about a little bit later
and
too.
And then you dig deeper and there's even more storylines. But we'll try to go to some of the regions that have a lot going on. And just to recap, the region qualifiers. So after they get to the region semifinals, the top 2 teams advance to the SODAC 16 where they are seeded and put together. So those are on February 26th, next week already. So this is something to talk about.
All right. So out of Region 2A, okay, you got 3 of the top 7 teams in the region. You got Hamlin, Sioux Valley, Clark Willow Lake, and then you got Clark Willow Lake and Hamlin playing this week.
Exactly. So they play each other. If Hamlin, who's been playing well, can get that done, it's still going to be no guarantees because you got 3 really strong teams in that region. So 3 of the top 7 teams in the state, rank-wise, only 2 of them are going to make the SODAC 16.
All right, and then you got the 3A. It's all about the push for positioning, I think, if you're in the 3A region.
Yeah, there's 4 really strong teams in this region. You got West Central, Dells, Flandreau, Tri-Valley. None of those really knocking on the door of a top 5 ranking right now, but they're all really strong. So that'll make for a really fun region tournament. West Central, by the way, plays Flandreau before the end of the season, so they might have to play twice within the span of a week or so.
Yeah, and that's always so tough, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is when you have a late season opponent, then you got to turn around right away and regroup, and then it's all of a sudden it's a playoff game. It becomes a little bit more intense, and there's a lot of mental strategy that has to go into that too. Out of 4A, there's 2 of the top teams in the state. You got Lennox and you got Sioux Falls Christian, who we've talked about, but those are pretty good. But then you also have you got some other teams, that are in there too, trying to.
Yeah, remember, 2 teams make it to the SODAC 16, so you got 2 of the top. You would think Lennox and Sioux Falls Christian will put their ticket in, but Vermilion playing really well lately. We talked about Maya Anderson and Canton playing really well lately. Dakota Valley, they started out 5-0 this year. We're a ranked team. They've really struggled since, but they have the players that could pull off that type of an upset. So 4A, there's no free tickets in Region 4A.
Yep, you got to come to play every game, especially when it gets to the playoffs. And then 6A, you got Mobridge, Miller, Cheyenne, Eagle, Butte. Those are a bunch of teams right there with just 4 or 5 losses.
Exactly. Again, strong teams and not, no easy punches into the SODAC 16 in this region. I think Mobridge lost to Lakota Tech on Monday. That really hurt them, which brings them back to the pack. Before that, they won 8 in a row. But I could see Cheyenne, Eagle, Butte, or Miller taking out one of those 2 teams. So who knows what's going to happen in 6A.
All right, and then we've got Class B for girls. Same sort of situation as we have for Class A as far as the scheduling and all of that with the games. But 1B, you have 6 teams that are over 500.
Yeah, this could be a scramble to see who gets to the SODAC qualifier in this one. Wabash Summit, they just moved into the rankings to the top 10. They haven't lost a game yet into Class B. They look like the favorites, but with Warner, Northwestern, Langford, Waverly South Shore, Hitchcock, Tulare, they're all dangerous. And as you look at their schedules, they've kind of all beat up on each other this year. Not enough room for everybody to make it. So we're going to find out. I think Wabash Summit probably the favorites here, but the 2 teams that make it, good luck trying to pick who they will be.
Well, speaking of beating up on each other, 2A, Region 2B, all these teams can beat each other too.
Yeah, Dubrook beat Arlington earlier this year. Arlington beat Castlewood. Castlewood beat Dubrook. Plus, you've had DeSmet have some upsets against some of these top teams. Wessington Springs has as well. And again, we're only taking 2 teams out of this group. Right now, Arlington, the number 1 seed, looking good with Jalen Huntemer. Dubrook, though, a team that made it to the state tournament last year, not just the SODAC 16, who brings back some power. And then Castlewood is definitely a team I wouldn't want to play. Again, just 2 out of those 3 teams going to make it.
All right, and then you got Region 3B, 4 teams are in the polls that are in this one, and the polls, are situated out in the top 10 right now. So tell me about 3B.
I mean, yeah, you got Coleman Egan, who's still undefeated in overall, of course, in Class B. Ethan, we talked about the tear that they've been on lately. Chester hasn't been beaten yet in Class B. They're only 2 losses on the year to Flandreau and Sioux Valley. So this is the case that they're making to maybe spread it out to a tournament of SODAC 32 instead of 16, because you have regions like this where you have 3 potential state title contenders all in the same region. That's really tough. And then you got Sanborn Central Woonsocket, a team that made it to the state tournament or championship game
A year ago, yeah.
And they've been getting votes in the top as well. And then St. Mary's, a team that made it to the state tournament last year, also in this group, could cause some havoc. So this one, of all of them, could be the most drama.
Yeah, and whenever you're dealing with state tournament teams from a year ago, even with some of the players maybe not on the team, it can, there's at least players that are on that team that have that mindset of knowing what it's like, knowing what it takes to get there.
Exactly.
And that can cause a lot of problems in the playoffs for teams that maybe haven't made it there in a few years.
This is going to be the toughest one to predict, and there's going to be a couple of teams left on the cutting room floor that don't get to make it to the SODAC 16 that are going to be very disappointed.
All right, so then you got 4B, all right? You got 3 teams that are top 10 teams, and they're Parkston, Centerville, and Gayville-Volland.
Yeah, and Parkston had a couple of unfortunate losses, but we know the caliber of that team. They can beat anybody. Centerville is on a roll right now, only 1 loss in state, and that came to Irene Wakanda, who's also in this region. So they could make some. And Gayville-Volland, another team, they have been great this year. Those athletes have really been coming on strong. So I think those 3 are really strong, but don't count out Freeman, Irene Wakanda, Avon, Trip Delmont Armor. All those teams have shown that they can play really good basketball.
Another one of those regions where there's a lot of teams with winning records.
Exactly.
And then you got 5B. This is kind of a race for second because you got Lyman in here, right?
You feel like Lyman's pretty strong at number 1.
Yeah, Lyman, one of the best teams in the state, we think, throughout this season. So then where do we go after Lyman?
That's where it gets exciting for me, because you've got Corsica Stickney. They've had some really big wins so far this year and a couple of losses, but they've got top-tier talent on that team. Marty's got a really good record. Gregory also has had a good record this year, and I think they have the ability to beat one of those 2 teams. So, to me, I agree. Lyman looks like they're probably got their toe in the SODAC 16, but who has that 2-3 spot? That's going to be a challenge.
And then you got 8B. Harding County has had another good year out in that region. Should be kind of like Lyman, should be that top team in that region. But then it goes, again, where do we go from here?
Yeah, you got Lemon and McIntosh. They co-op for some sports, right? And they're going to play really against each other to try to figure out who's going to be able to make it. That should be a great matchup for the second spot. They played Thursday, so they're another one of those teams where they could play each other twice in the span of a week or so. So that's definitely something worth watching.
All right, and because the boys' state tournament occurs the week after the girls' state tournament, we're going to save that boys' playoff push for next week's show. But yeah, I mean, when you just look at the girls, any final thoughts, Jandy, when you're looking at the playoff push for girls with all these regions that we talked about?
Well, we said it. There's a few regions where there's going to be some people who are really had their hopes on getting to a state tournament and won't be able to even get to the SODAC 16. So that's just part of it, though. After you get to the SODAC 16, you got to win that. And I'm glad they do reseed to get the best state tournament possible. But there's some teams that are going to be saying what if here in a week or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've mentioned some of these games that are going to be taking place, but let's do a little bit deeper dive here in the top tilts for the week before we go.
Yeah, Thursday night, a big night for both Hamlin and Clark-Willow Lake. On the boys and girls side, both of those 2 teams really strong in boys and girls basketball, and they're both playing against each other. It's going to be huge wins for whoever comes through with that.
And then you got Coleman Egan at Chester. Both of these teams, are fabulous teams as well in that top 10.
We just talked about those 2 teams haven't lost a Class B game. Well, they play each other. Somebody's going to have their first Class B loss on Thursday.
A 5 overtime tie.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just call it a tie. So those are just a couple of great ones on Thursday right away. And then Friday, Watertown, Huron boys. So Watertown's hitting their stride right now. Huron came into the season as one of those teams to watch. And I'll tell you what, they haven't really lived up yet. They would need a big win, and this could be a really big win for them. And then Saturday, you know, a lot of the A and B stuff is done, or winding up at least, especially on the girls' side.
But again, we certainly appreciate everybody that tunes in to watch the show every week. Again, we'll be back next week to talk about the boys' playoff push. I'm Nate Weck. That's Jason Andera. This has been another week of Game Time here on SDPB.